Welcome back to Sumsub for Experts. I am your host, Kat Cloud, Head of Government Relations here at Sumsub. Today's episode focuses on a topic that is close and increasingly critical in the compliance, fintech, and regulatory world: trust. In a sector that runs on data, algorithms, and risk modeling, it's easy to overlook that trust remains the most important and essential asset any financial services company can provide and build, not just as a safeguard, but as a strategic advantage. Joining us today is Dr. Louise Beaumont. Welcome, thank you. A globally recognized fintech expert and regulatory advisor with deep experience across open banking, open finance, open data, and supporting technologies. Louise has spent the last 15 years focused on developing the market, working with legislators, regulators, standard schemes, and industry bodies to create disruption, with corporates to cope with disruption, and with startups to exploit disruption, with open and accessible data as the guiding principle. She's here to help us have a think about trust, not as a soft value, but as a decisive business differentiator. Hello and welcome, Louise.
Thank you very much for having me.
So to kick us off, we are going to be jumping into a few key topics for the rest of the episode.
Okay.
We're going to start with the big picture. So in a world of digital identity, open banking, open finance, open data, AI fraud, and embedded finance, why is trust still an ultimate differentiator?
Trust is the keystone. So if you've ever built a bridge, the keystone is the stone right at the very top of the bridge that stops the two halves of the bridge collapsing. So it's the most important stone in the entire bridge. Trust is that keystone, and it's the thing upon which everything else depends. So if you don't have trust, you've probably got three big problems. Customers, whether that's your consumers or businesses' customers, they lose confidence and they opt out. If people lose confidence, if they opt out, that means your adoption stalls. People aren't taking up your services or your products. Problem number one. Problem number two, the businesses with which you collaborate to deliver your product or services, so other businesses in the ecosystem, they stop having that trust and confidence in each other, and they stop investing. They stop investing in the relationships, and then they stop investing in the ecosystem, and the whole ecosystem withers. And the third problem that you've got is that regulatory scrutiny ramps right up, and that's never a good thing. Right, so those are the three things broadly that happens if you lose trust. With trust, you get three good things. You get the driver of innovation for the end customer, because it's working. You know, people are adopting it. You've got the chance to improve and get ever better. So that's driver of innovation. Then you've got a driver of efficiency through the ecosystem, because again, it's working. So if something's working, you are incentivized to get it working better, faster, cheaper. There's an incentive for efficiency. And thirdly, you've got an economic driver for growth. And every organization and everybody likes living and working in an economy which is growing. So growth, very positive. So that's very different pictures if you haven't got the trust or if you have got the trust. And this goes way beyond compliance. Compliance is the bare minimum you can get away with, right? This is why you've got to think about trust as being far more than just about a compliance thing. And it's about how you need to design those trust first strategies that inspire customers to give your product a go, try it out for the very first time, and then to enable those customers who've given you a product a go to become long-term and loyal customers, because that's the base you need for your business to grow.
Yeah, no, completely. I really like the one point you said. We have to think about trust is more than just compliance. I think that's very, very important, and it's often, especially in the fintech space where there's constantly things changing, things are developing, it always does go back to trust. So I guess following up on, and you kind of touched on it a little bit in your explanation, but so fintech moves fast. We both know that. I think everyone listening knows that it moves very fast. So I guess, how do you use trust as a competitive advantage?
The market does change. It changes very rapidly. We're constantly amazed at the rate of change. But human beings haven't changed. We evolve very slowly. And trust is a very human thing. So if you look at that, you look at the customer angle in financial services, and you think back to how we used to do things in financial services even 20, 30 years ago. It used to be incredibly human to human. It used to be customer to bank manager and vice versa. And your bank manager didn't just know you, he, and it was always a he, probably knew your mum and your dad. And he had a really good perspective on whether you could actually afford that mortgage or that loan you were going for, because he probably knew where you worked, and he probably knew how that was doing because he banked that business, right? So you had that experience of whether it was very human to human. And then financial services became amazingly monolithic. Your bank manager disappeared, or suddenly had 1,000 business customers to manage, or something unfeasible, couldn't possibly do it. All of that knowledge disappeared because it was in people's heads, it was what they knew. And trust atrophied right the way down to, well, the bank probably won't lose my money, but you didn't have anybody you could go and talk to at all. Now we've got financial services on the route to open banking and open finance, where we're on a journey for every individual or any business to receiving a hyper-personalized, predictive and preemptive services. So hyper-personalized, this is about you and your business. Predictive, we can see for a business a cash flow problem might be coming up in 2 or 3 months. Preemptive, and here's the loan you're pre-cleared for, or here's a selection of loans that you're pre-cleared for. You know, you need to think about one or other of these options in order to avoid that cash flow issue in 2 to 3 months. So hyper-personalized, predictive and preemptive. So, and I couldn't think of a good word for this, so I've made one up. Financial services companies need to inflourish, or to re-flourish. There's got to be a better word out there. Their understanding of and enabling of consumer trust, their customers' trust. And that's why I think it's a competitive advantage, and that's why I think customers have to treat it as that keystone and take it very, very seriously.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I think it's been nice to see the transition to more of that. Like, I log in and I look at, let's say I'm buying a house, looking at mortgages. It makes it that much easier because I can get that more personalized, predictive type of offerings and discussions. So when I go to that process, I know I'm a little bit more educated.
And also you can imagine a future where your mortgage payments go up or go down based on your circumstances that month and the predictions for your circumstances over the coming year. So it should be that, just remember that hyper-personalized, predictive and preemptive, that's where we're aiming for. And that is an opportunity to inflourish.
I love it.
Trust. Somebody out there is going to have a much better word for it, but I was stumped, so I made a new one.
We will take any suggestions in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Give me a better word.
So I guess picking up on that, and you kind of touched on it a little bit when you said in the beginning that we as everyday people, we don't really change. So how would you say trust does impact customer behavior?
It's hard won, and it's really easily lost.
Very true.
So anything that feels a bit off is going to flag up in that customer's brain as, I'm going to just pause. I'm just going to take a moment. This doesn't feel quite right. And that pause is a loss of confidence.
True.
Right, so just understand, the minute something feels a little bit off, you've immediately lost a little bit of confidence, and more than you think you have.
Exactly, yeah.
And when the customer loses that confidence, they stop what they're doing and they may not restart. They may not go back to what they were doing. They may not go back to the beginning. They may just delete the app. You know, they may just not. They could opt out completely. And that goes back to your point about what happens while the adoption stalls. That's really bad for your financial services business because it's just another customer that you had to fight really hard to get their attention and to get them to try you, and it just
Gone.
it's gone. They've gone. But that's got much wider implications for market development as a whole. So the person that tries that new thing, and for sake of argument, it could be an open banking thing. It could be connecting your bank account to the app in order to have more visibility of your. If it doesn't work, and it doesn't work flawlessly, and it isn't a nice experience, well, guess what? The next time somebody asks you to join up, so it has real implications for market development. The whole market could stall. This means that you lose all the efficiencies that everybody's worked to get to, where we could actually deliver services. They might be the same services, but the efficiency thing of them being better, faster, or cheaper. But you also lose all of the net new economic benefit from doing things that we couldn't previously do before. And that means that you've got market development on a go slow. And you'll see it, right? It's like when you're learning how to drive and you don't know quite how to. This will all be got rid of by the self-driving cars. But when you were trying to put your foot on the accelerator and you couldn't, it jumped forward and then it stalled. It jumped forward and then it stalled. That's the market development experience when the products that go to market just are glitchy and they don't work, and the customers lose the confidence and they just don't go full-throated adoption.
Yeah, I mean, I think we still see that as a problem with open banking. It's taken so long for it to kind of be mainstream that there was a lot of hesitation at first.
Yeah,
definitely. Would you say trust is more important today than in the past, or do you think it's just more visible, or like that we talk about it more?
I think it's just as important, and I think it's just as visible. But what has changed is the sheer number of trust decisions that any given human being has to make on any given day.
That's true, yeah.
They have to make so many decisions. I have to make so many decisions. You have to make so many decisions. It's gone from not that many 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, to an absolute tsunami of decisions now. And the way in which we've been asked for our trust has changed. It's gone from person to person to, I'm not really asking for anything because I'm monolithic and you're stuck with me, to person to app.
Very true, yeah.
So you're making lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of trust decisions. You're just making them in a different way. So the guidance for anyone listening to this is, do not make it hard for your customers. Make it really easy to make good trust-based decisions which are right for them.
Agreed.
Right for that individual, right for that business, because then you'll build a strong foundation for that trust and it will become that keystone, that critical stone.
No, definitely. Completely agree. I think, because if you think on a day-to-day basis, the number of times you're being asked to press continue or just to think about something. So it's weird because I didn't actually think about it until you said it. And it's like, wow.
Every single one of those.
Every single decision I need to make, there's a trust element to it. And there's so many decisions a day. But no, definitely something to think about. So I think if we're going to just slightly switch to a new topic now. So we're going to focus more on the trust gap and especially the rise in digital identity. So let's talk about digital ID, something that we at Sumsub care very much about. It's one of kind of the keystones of our product offering. So why do you think it's suddenly at the center of trust conversations in finance and also specifically in fintech?
Trust works if I know you're you and you know I'm me.
Yeah.
So it's about that proving who you are and proving and knowing who you're talking to or what you're talking to. So it's businesses being able to prove they are who they are, it's individuals being able to prove they are who they are, and I know who you are and you know who I am. That's the basis for trust.
Yeah. I think that's the most elegant way of saying it. Very simple. It's just trust is knowing who each other is and knowing that I know you're you and I know that it's coming from a very valuable source.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, completely.
That's exactly it.
So how does a fragmented or inconsistent identity infrastructure undermine exactly what we were just talking about, like knowing that you are who you are?
Anything that makes it tricky for me to know you are who you are or I am to know who I am, for you to know who I am, anything that makes that tricky undermines trust because it feels a little bit off. And in fact, it makes it harder to establish in the first place, and then it eats away at whatever level of trust you've been able to establish. And remember, it's easy to destroy and hard to build. So anything which is fragmented or inconsistent gives you lots of ways for water to get into the and then once the water sets, it freezes, it breaks apart that trust. So think of it as like an infiltration of water. Any doubt is an infiltration of water into the system. The system then, it freezes, it turns into ice, and it just breaks it apart a little bit. So anything which is inconsistent, anything which is fragmented, just opportunities for water to get in and glitch the system.
Yeah, no, because exactly to your point, like it's very easy to lose the trust, and once it's gone, it's if you can get it back,
it's harder to get back than it was to build in the first place.
Exactly, yeah.
And anybody who says, yeah, but we've gone through fire together, I'm like, yeah. Yeah, let's avoid the fire.
Oh, exactly. As much as we can, let's try and avoid the fire. So what do you think are the biggest gaps in how financial institutions currently manage identity and trust?
Well, the big issue here in the UK is that we just do not have widespread adoption of business or personal identity, digital identity. We just don't have it, and we need it. The good news is that we now have an Act of Parliament. The Data Use and Access Bill is now an Act. We had royal assent in the last couple of days. And that means that we've now got the basis for smart data and digital identity. So that's really good, but it also means in our environment, we're at the start of a lengthy process of consultation.
Very true.
Which could take 12, 18 months to establish the secondary legislation that we need in order for this to be all working. Now, government is really clear. This doesn't mean industry has to wait. Industry could get on and step up and build out the ecosystem and do all of those things. Get the scheme infrastructure in place to build scale. Because there's no point in doing anything if you're not doing it at scale, because really you want everybody to benefit. Good outcomes for individuals, for businesses, and for the economy as a whole. But businesses like certainty when they invest, right? They like to know there's either going to be no regulation, in which case they can go on and invest, or there's going to be regulation and they want to know exactly what it's going to do. They don't feel like investing and then that money being wasted because the regulation came in and made their business approach or their model inappropriate. But nonetheless, government would like everybody to step up and start making those investments. I think businesses also need to engage in that consultation process, because that's the only way you're going to be able to make sure that informed regulation, outcome-driven regulation is in place, and that it's going to do enough to allow the market to properly develop, within which everybody with a sensible business can be successful. The other interesting thing, of course, is that the industrial strategy has been published. It's a great big thumping document. I know it's a great big thumping document because I'm dyslexic and I had to print it out, and it's about yay big. And I'm really looking forward to reading it in detail. But there were a couple of things that really stuck out when I was glancing through. One of which is there's a good investment by government into smart data, which is really important. I think to the tune of 36 million, which is a big hike on their previous budget. So that's very important. But also a recognition that we're a regulator-rich environment here in the UK. And I'd done a bit of digging. I wanted to see how many regulators we had, because it suddenly got into my head that, we should really think about this. How many regulators have we got? I thought we had about 90. And then I talked to the chair of the Institute of Regulators, and he said, no, you're completely wrong. It's 150.
Wow.
And I remember just taking a deep intake of breath. And I recognize what makes the UK a great place to do business. One of those things is the rule of law.
Yeah, true.
Your business is not going to be taken over by the dictator's second son, right? You don't have to worry about that kind of thing. But you can, if your business, worry about the sheer amount of regulation and how not to fall foul of any of it if there's 150 or so regulators. And one of the things in the industrial strategy was an idea that we're going to reduce the number of regulators. So simplify the regulation and reduce the number of regulators. So I thought, since that was buried in page whatever of the industrial strategy, I'll just bring that to the front of people's minds, because I think it's an interesting one for the UK to think about.
Definitely, completely agree. And kind of picking up on a point that you just said there, is that you said businesses need to engage. Now that we have the Act, businesses need to engage. So let's think about principles for a second. So what principles should guide the development of trust in finance?
Well, I always start from the customer's perspective, that individual consumer or business at the end of the chain. And I was chairing a panel recently on exactly the subject around trust. And I had a great woman from Which, the organisation Which, on the panel. And she came up with a really nice framework, which I thought I will steal, shamelessly steal Which's approach, which focuses on governance, on protection, and on scalability. So no surprises there,
exactly.
But governance is very sensible. How is data collected? How is it shared? What are the roles and responsibilities? Redress, what happens when you go wrong? All has to be really easy to understand for the customer. So that's it. Governance, very simple. Protection. Now this is both the privacy angle, and we all know there are a million privacy lawyers out there. So it's not just the privacy angle, it's also the cybersecurity angle. What happens if your data or your identity or whatever else gets lost or released and it goes and lives its best life on the dark web. Scalability, both increasing in scale, obviously, but also ramping up to include a greater population, a greater spectrum of the population. So it's not just about creating lovely, large, juicy markets, but it's about making sure that everybody's enveloped, everybody's brought in to those markets.
So it's touching on kind of that financial inclusion element, where this isn't just for you and I as fintech savvy consumers, but every single person. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. I think it's a good approach as well. So if we think, kind of looping back again to the competitive market and trust as an advantage, like in an industry where products are increasingly similar, I mean, let's look at open banking. Almost every single open banking journey looks the same. Is trust becoming the competitive edge?
Yes, I believe so. I think it is the keystone point.
Yeah, no, completely agree. So in such a crowded, regulated space, how can I actually make trust my differentiator?
It's a bit where you remember that people are human, organizations are run by humans, and you embrace that throughout their experience with you. You remember that you are fighting to win or fighting to retain their trust throughout their entire experience with you. And for organizations dealing with other organizations in the ecosystem to create the product together, to create that customer service, that experience, that product, remember these slightly terrifying words: trust means liability. So that's what we're really talking about here. Trust always sounds a bit fluffy. It sounds a bit nice. If you want to think about it in a way which makes you sit up straight and, pay attention a bit more, think of it as liability, because that's a concept which seems to be taken more seriously.
Definitely.
It's the same, it's different sides of the same coin, it's the same thing, but it's really important that you remember we're not talking about something which is fluffy here, we're talking about something which is really important and which has, get it wrong, teeth.
Exactly. I mean, the entire time for this conversation, you've been talking about how we build ecosystems, we build companies based on trust. So yeah, no, completely agree with that. So I guess leaning a bit more into, let's look at this more of a collaborative and industry-wide thing. So what role does collaboration and interoperability play in building trust? Collaboration
is key, and I think we're getting better at it as a sort of an industry, because I remember 15 years ago, trying to get a bunch of fintechs in a room and getting them to collaborate, and they're like, no, we compete with each other, and I'm like, no, you need to do you need to do both.
You do.
You need to collaborate first, because we've got to collaborate on the rules, and then we compete on the game.
Exactly.
So collaborate on the rules of the ecosystem, like get involved in those consultations to secondary legislation. Collaborate on the rules of the ecosystem under which we will all live. a really easy example of that is standards.
Okay.
If we've got agreed standards, we can all build to the same standard, which means data flows, identity flows without glitches. So compete on the game, but collaborate on the rules. So absolutely, by all means, compete to win and retain the customer, but collaborate first. So you've got to have those two skills. And some companies are, shall we say, better at one than they are at the other. Interoperability means that the whole ecosystem can scale, which means a bigger market. Just let that sink in, a bigger market. And I'm all for bigger pies, right? Not just scrambling to grab a bigger slice of a smaller pie.
Agreed.
I like bigger pies. So let's go for that big pie energy.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think that's one thing that we have seen kind of more recently within the fintech market development is that everyone's fighting for the 1%. This isn't a race down to the bottom. This is a race to a bigger pie.
Make a bigger pie.
Exactly. So I guess how should financial leaders in this space think about trust? Like not just as risk mitigation, but more as a growth driver. So like how do they get to that bigger pie?
If you've got trust, if you've got that keystone in place, you've got a driver of innovation for the end consumer. So you can do more. You can deliver more, you can create more services. And financial leaders all know that that in order to bring in that net new revenue, they need to innovate, they need to do something different.
Yeah.
So trust is your driver for innovation, innovation is your driver to net new revenues. Net new revenues equal growth. So that's pretty simple, everybody gets that. But it's more than this, it's actually increasing the pace at which you can grow because you're able to bring efficiencies not just in your own organization but throughout the ecosystem because you want a really efficient ecosystem. So think of it as getting the barnacles off the bottom of the boat so the boat can go faster.
Sure.
You can get rid of all of those inefficiencies if you have trust. And if you get those things together, then what you've got is a driver of economic growth for the country, and every organization would like to be part of, every consumer would like to be part of, that growing economy, because then you can really thrive. It's no longer just about survival or competing for marginal gains. It's actually about thriving in a much bigger economy. Again, that bigger pie.
Exactly, yeah. So I think we've done a lot of kind of talking about what the element of trust is, how we can do it. So I think now let's talk about some actionable takeaways. So all of our listeners can walk away from this and know exactly what they need to do to get the most out of trust. So what can leaders in financial services do today to move forward a more trust-centric, identity-driven future?
Because of where we are, particularly here in the UK, with that Act of Parliament, with this secondary legislation being developed over the next 12 to 18 months, we've got to collaborate on the rules of the ecosystem. Get stuck in and make it an ecosystem that you want to be part of, that's going to work for you, going to work for all of the organizations you need to partner with to be successful, and create that bigger, better, juicier market. And then when you've done that, we can all compete furiously to better serve the consumer. And then the consumer gets a better choice, they get better products and services, and they have a better life. But it's that you've got to master those two skills, collaboration and competition.
Yeah, so I like that. Collaborate today, compete tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So then from kind of putting a consumer angle on it, so what should consumers or end users be asking for or expecting when it comes to trust and identity?
If you're the consumer at the end of this, epic ecosystem, you've got to know why they are being asked to share their data or their identity, whatever it is they're being asked to share, who it's being shared with, and that is indeed the company that they believe it to be. Right? And they need to know then what that data or identity, whatever it is being used to do, i.e. what services is it powering. They should then understand if they want to stop this process, how to stop this process, and they also need to know if something goes wrong, how do I get redress? How do I get out of it, and how do I get redress? They also need to know that they are protected, both their privacy and their data, their identity. So they need to know, without uttering the words cybersecurity must be top notch, they need to have that sense of trust that this is an organization that's not going to get sloppy or careless about this stuff. And more people and more companies need to be included, because financial services should be all, not just for the privileged few.
Exactly.
But that's for all, because that makes it a bigger, more interesting, juicier market with more opportunity for more organizations to do better.
Completely agree. Louise, thank you so much for the insights and clarity. I think we definitely got a lot of background, and we now have some key actionable steps that we can take as an industry, as regulators. So I think you've helped me, at least, and Sumsub rethink trust, not just as a compliance burden, but more of a driver for growth, more of a driver for innovation. So I like the point you made. Collaborate today, compete tomorrow. I think that's something that we're definitely going to take away in the digital identity space and start kind of pushing for that more. So yeah, just a huge thank you. Thank you so much for joining the channel, and we look forward to welcoming you in the future.
Thank you very much.
In the meantime, I'm Kat Cloud. Stay sharp and stay compliant.